Chicago area landlords who reject tenants with evictions on their records are getting sued by tenants' rights groups. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have quite the interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Chicago, Illinois. So Chicago is one of those places, obviously, where landlords, they have to fight with all of these ridiculous tenant protections, okay? But at the same time, landlords, they're not doing as bad as they are on the coast. But every once in a while, you hear about one of these articles, and it's just like, my goodness, what is going on up there? So right now, these tenants' rights groups, they're suing landlords who have been, doing their proper tenant screening, like I like to do, and rejecting tenants with evictions on their records. Okay, so there's a lot of good reasons why landlords do not want tenants with evictions on their records, and the number one being that these people have proven that they don't pay. Okay, we want to get paid on time every single month. But when someone has an eviction on their record, the most likely reason they were evicted is because they don't pay the rent. So why would we want to rent to them? I mean, if we can't use somebody's eviction history in order to do our tenant screening, well, you're taking away one of the most powerful tools there is in order to help us. That's why I am so opposed to these ridiculous, legislations they're trying to push, which say, oh, well, automatically we're going to remove the eviction history off of somebody's record, or we're going to remove eviction filings that weren't completed. Well, an eviction filing is a very good notification to a landlord, because a lot of eviction cases, they don't go all the way through to the end. Sometimes you're able to get that tenant out of there without having to go through the rest of the very expensive process. But it would still be good for future landlords to know that you have this tenant here who does not pay the rent and is a garbage tenant, okay? And don't give me that excuse either that, well, the eviction was 20 years ago. Well, you know what? Sometimes you face consequences for long, long periods of time. And if a landlord wants to reject you because you have a 20-year-old eviction on your record, that is the landlord's right. That should be the landlord's right. We have to be able to make our own cost-benefit analysis of renting to each potential tenant. We don't need the government interference stepping in there and forcing us to do stuff we don't want to do. And that's what these tenant right groups are trying to do by suing us. They want us to rent to these tenants who basically are going to rob us blind. Force us to rent the tenants who are going to rob us. That's how dumb this crap is. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So what do you think of these laws that force landlords to rent the tenants with evictions on their records? Okay, I am so it is just angers me. It angers me because it takes away all of our ability to do proper screening. There's nothing more telling on a tenant's history than do they have an eviction on there. There is nothing more telling than that. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why you can reject a tenant when you're going through the application process, right? A lot of reasons, but one of the number one reasons, if I see an eviction on a record, I am not renting to that person. That person is not staying in my house because they've already proven, to me that, hey, they are not trustworthy. I can't trust them to pay me the rent that they owe. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from Vice.com, and it says, legal aid groups are coming for landlords who reject renters with past evictions. Ah, man. Landlords getting sued for doing good tenant screening. Ridiculous. Anyway, let's get into the article. Legal aid groups in Chicago filed a lawsuit and a complaint with the Department of Housing Preservation and Development on Tuesday against corporate landlords for automatically rejecting prospective tenants with any prior connection to an eviction case. Legal Aid Chicago filed a federal lawsuit against Hunter Properties, Inc. for rejecting renters in Cook County on the basis of having an eviction. In addition, Hope Fair Housing Center filed a federal complaint against Oak Park Apartments for having a blanket policy against previous evictions. Both legal claims allege that the practice has a disparate impact on Black and Latino renters and violates the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And that's a bunch of garbage because you know what? If it violated the Fair Housing Act, then it would be illegal across the entire country. Okay, unless they're talking about some kind of Fair Housing Act that only applies in the Cook County, Chicago. Okay, so I truly doubt that. And as for it having a disparate impact, I don't like this disparate impact nonsense personally because these eviction rules they apply to people of all races, all religions, all sexual preferences. Anybody who has an eviction on their record can face the same exact consequences. Now, just because more Black people have evictions on their record, that doesn't mean that this is a racist policy. That's a stretch at best, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of landlords, such as myself, are Black, and we reject people with evictions on their records. Okay, so it's nonsense. It's nonsense. They're stretching. They're trying to make it look like something that it isn't in order to garner sympathy because that's what these people do. They want, basically what they want is socialism. That's what I personally believe. I think they want the government to take over all private property and be in charge of everything. And then they can, deal out however much housing they believe that each person should have. What ridiculous nonsense. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Property rights are the basis of like freaking everything in our entire country, our entire civilization, the basis of our rights. It all comes down to personal property rights. Okay? So them trying to take them away, that's taking away our freedom overall. It really is. A ruling in the plaintiff's favor could have an impact on millions of renters across the country and potentially deter blanket rejections based on eviction history, which are unfortunately common. According to the Legal Aid Chicago lawsuit, Hunter Properties operates more than 2,500 apartments in Chicago. Legal Aid alleges that Hunter was rejecting all applicants for ever having the eviction filing against them, including cases where the landlord withdrew the filing or the judge tossed out the case. Listen, I mentioned earlier in the video, right? There's a lot of reasons why the evictions don't go all the way through. If the judge tosses it out, that doesn't mean that the tenant pays rent. That just means that, hey, the landlord might not have followed the process 100% correctly. So yeah, it's bad. It's bad whenever you sit there and you tell me that, hey, I cannot look at this person's eviction history in order to make a tenant decision, a decision on who's going to be living in my property. So I put the wrong tenant in my property. They don't lose anything. They don't lose anything if I rent to a tenant who's never going to pay me. They move up in there. They get to stay for however long, and they don't pay me a dime. And I lose thousands of dollars. So yeah, there's a good reason. Just like when you are screening tenants, right? You want to look at that tenant and see if they have a job. Why? Because if they're unable to pay the rent, you don't want to put them in there. Gee, there's so many problems. And it frustrates me. It frustrates me to no end that, first they're going to go after these big landlords. Oh yeah, we're going after the corporate landlords, but notice that this is a federal lawsuit. So it could impact landlords throughout the entire country. It hit me here in Nebraska, and I end up, unable to look at evictions anymore because of this nonsense. They feel so bad for all these people with evictions on their records, right? Well, you know what? Landlords are still going to find a way. And I've mentioned this before. If you take away our ability to look at people's eviction history, well, we're going to put very high credit numbers up there on our application. We're going to say, hey, you got to have a credit score of over 700 in order to rent my place. And most people with evictions on their records, they don't have good credit. Okay. Or we might say, as landlords, if we do go through an eviction with a tenant, we're going to make sure that we put any debts or stuff on their credit history. That way, when other landlords screen the tenant's credit, well, they're going to see that, hey, they still owe their previous landlord money. So even though the eviction isn't actually something that we can look at anymore, we'll be able to see that they have all this accumulated rent debt. I bring that up because it actually happened to me. Okay, somebody applied to live at one of my houses here in Omaha, and I thought it was a good tenant. It was a couple, right? And so I run their background through the background thing, right? I look at their credit history or their credit report, and they owe their previous landlord $2,000, and I'm like, what the heck is this? They had no eviction on their record, by the way. Okay, so these tenants applied for my place here in Omaha, and they owed their previous landlord $2,000, and it was on their credit history that they have a $2,000 debt owed to their previous landlord. Instant rejection. Instant. Like, I was like, no, no. If you couldn't even pay your previous landlord, how are you going to pay me? I don't give a crap. If I've changed, I'm a better. No, get out of here. I've got more than enough overqualified tenants. I don't have to deal with this nonsense. So anyway, we'll see how this whole lawsuit thing works out. But for now, man, this is nonsense in my opinion.